Hi, everybody. So my name is Sherrod DeGrippo. I am Director of Threat Intelligence Strategy at Microsoft. And I want to give you quickly, before we start, why are you here? Well, my wonderful, talented colleague, Jessica Payne, had an emergency and was unable to attend. So we put this panel together in less than 48 hours with some of my favorite people, colleagues in the industry. And I appreciate all of your flexibility, because when you're in threat intelligence and security, you have to be flexible because things change all the time, and we're ready for that. And before I introduce the panel, I want to expand your mind just a tiny bit. Each one of these questions that we're going to talk about, each topic, is associated with a famous work of art. You can see the Smiling Spider by Odeon Redden on this front page. I think as knowledge workers, it's important that we remember the arts exist. And so we'll have some art accompaniment for everyone to enjoy as we talk. So the first thing I want to do is walk through the incredible colleagues that I was able to get on super short notice to come join us. Literally, like a day and a half, we were able to get fantastic speakers on this panel. And Waymon, I want to start with you, Waymon Ho at Microsoft. Tell us your title and give me a little something about your favorite actor.
Well, my name is Waymon Ho. I'm a senior hunt analyst at Microsoft. I'm on the Mystic team at Microsoft Threat Intelligence. We normally track nation state and financially motivated threat actors. I don't know. My favorite threat actor right now is Octotempest, which is one that I'm going to be talking about later today. Yeah, I mean, they're a pretty cool group, so.
You can see Octotempest today in the same room at 11:45, just FYI. Waymon and Riley will be presenting on Octotempest. I also have with me Melissa Bischoping from Tanium. Melissa, tell me something really fun you like to work on.
So my name is Melissa Bischoping, Director of Endpoint Security Research at Tanium, based in the DC area. I get a job every day that's very much different. The task changes. So I do a lot of work on retrospective analysis of threat actors in 0 days and how we can learn from those mistakes. I spend a lot of time right now actually working on insider threat and how we can build better mechanisms of detection.
Fantastic. And I'm also joined by Paul Eubanks, Senior Threat Research Engineer at Cisco. Paul and I have known each other for years because Paul is in the Augusta area and I'm in Atlanta, so we're neighbors. Paul, give us a little bit about something lately that you've seen that you're interested in.
Probably, like Melissa over here, I kind of work on a wide swath of things. So right now it's kind of a dichotomy, right, between crimeware and APT espionage detection. So.
I would like to hear from the audience. I'm going to count to 3, and you're going to shout out if you prefer APT over crimeware. Shout out your favorite. You ready? 1, 2, 3.
Crime.
Okay.
It's almost split in half.
It was one.
Yeah.
This is the crimeware side. That's the APT side.
Crimeware's cooler. Let's get a little fight going. So what we're seeing now is that, obviously, as exemplified here at BlueHat, all of us have to work together more than we ever have before. It's about community. We recently released the Microsoft Digital Defender report, led by my colleague, Anne. Can I have just like a little round of applause for Anne? Please check out the MDDR if you haven't already. But one of the main themes of the MDDR is that we have to work together as a community. And I think in security, we've always been able to do that. And so I want to ask my panelists, in terms of working together with community, intelligence sharing, data sharing, things like that, Waymon, what kinds of things are you able to do in the community that make it easier to track the actors you track?
Yeah, I think nowadays, right, the economy, especially in crime, it's very muddy. A lot of these actors are working together as well, and it makes it very tough for attribution, especially in our field in threat intelligence. Things that make it easier for us now is that I think there's less of a silo, that everybody is not, keeping things to themselves. We're all talking to each other now. We're all working together and collaborating. And I think some of the ways that we do that from like partnership levels, from an analyst level, it's something that is growing, and I really like that. So.
Melissa, what about you?
So one of the things I'm most excited to see in the last few years is the increased public-private partnership. There's been a lot of initiatives through CISA, through other government efforts to increase that intelligence sharing, because at the end of the day, we are all working towards the same cause. Luke Stevens, I think, posted something that I shared on LinkedIn earlier this week about how we have to get past some of our blinky boxes and great advertising campaigns, and we need to really talk about we're human beings solving very human problems that affect human lives and human retirement funds, and this is a very real problem. So I think we're seeing a culture emerge from the community itself of we all actually do want to solve these problems together, and there's an increased eagerness from companies, from intel sharing groups to actually come together in the same room, and that's where conferences like this really shine.
Paul, anything you've seen in the community that's been helpful for you?
So I'm going to go ahead and use this opportunity to plug the Cyber Threat Alliance that Cisco has a big part in. It's a sort of consortium of security vendors that work to share intelligence that we found, sometimes prior to publication, even so that everybody that's involved with the alliance can then use this information to bolster their mitigation systems for their own products. And I think we've actually had some pretty fruitful info sharing from there with government and private sector alike.
Okay, so I want to move on. Speaking of government and private sector, all of the panelists, including myself, have had government jobs at some point. Anyone in here, raise your hand if you've ever worked for or currently work at some kind of government entity or a public sector. I mean, that's quite a bit. That's almost half the room. So a lot of us do go back and forth. So my question for you is, which is better? No, I'm just kidding. What are some differences that you've experienced coming out of public sector and government and military type DoD roles into private enterprise?
Yeah, so I think it's very recent for me. I actually joined Microsoft about a year ago. Prior to that, I worked for the FBI. I was in law enforcement in the U.S. government, right? I think the biggest difference for me is, back in my last job, it was very regimented. It was very structured. Here at Microsoft, what I really like is that in private sector, we get to be creative. We get to be more proactive rather than reactive, and we get to shape the way on how we track threat actors. We get to find little pieces that are outside of the bubble or outside of the context for us to do that. So.
I'll add on to that. I think the opportunities when you're working in the private sector is that you get to see how different industries respond and how different verticals respond. So what's important to you when you're working for government is not the same as what's important to someone who works in oil and gas or someone who works in finance or healthcare. And when you start to get exposure to how those different organizations prioritize risks and how they prioritize managing their threat landscape, I think that gives valuable context that you can then take back and forth. There needs to be more cross-pollination.
Yeah. So I kind of took a strange path. I went from private sector to government and then back to private sector. And
Ooh.
I wouldn't say that really says anything sort of subliminal there.
Really?
But,
I don't know.
but no, so the one thing that I did take away from, I was at NSA for 8 years, and the one thing that I took away from there is they have such a regimented training pipeline for people that come in completely green, that have no experience in, some of them even in basic computer networking technologies. So they can take anybody that doesn't have already a head start in the field and kind of point them in the direction that they want them to go, give them that sort of training. And what that also leads to is a lot more pipelines for people who aren't typically in the computer science college educated pipeline. They get these people from all different backgrounds, and so you get a lot more diverse mindset and workforce population. It's pretty cool.
So I'll actually add a little bit to that from my story. I started in government 20 years ago, and there was a ton of training, and I went to so many SANS classes. I got CISSP, all paid for by government. Another thing that is very weird that they trained us on is that every quarter they would bring us out into the parking lot and start a fire in a galvanized tub, and we would hand a fire extinguisher to a line of people, and you would so that you could be fire certified, because I worked with nuclear security. And so I learned how to put out fires every quarter when I worked at the government. Literally.
Literally fires.
Literally fires. So talking about training and tools, I just want to ask this one specifically to Waymon. KC7. Give us your super quick bullet point on what KC7 is.
So KC7 is a nonprofit organization. What we do is we bring like real world data, or we try to bring simulated data to people who are interested in cybersecurity, those who are transitioning, students, professionals who want to get into cybersecurity, give them the tools and resources that they need to succeed in a role in cyber. I'm not talking about like learning about the foundations of like the internet or like how to dissect network packet, but like tools that you need to respond to an incident, to investigate a threat actor and identify its motivations and things like that. So,
where can we find KC7 if we want to check it out?
KC7cyber.com. So.
All right. I wanted to give an opportunity to shout out KC7. So let's talk about hunting grounds. I think one of the things that we all talk about is telemetry. And I'll kind of ask the audience, if there is one piece of telemetry that you could have, right? Like you could see network data, you could see email data, you could see cloud data. Which one is the one that you could absolutely not give up? Anybody? Identity data. Ooh, okay. What about you over here? EDR. Man, I would not give up network packet capture, but I would give up PCAPs, but I come from a different world, I guess. Melissa, you focus a lot on endpoint.
I do. So memory for me is like memory artifacts. Someone once told me earlier in my career, like malware can run, but it can't hide in memory.
Ooh, okay.
And that's been the last year. I've been spending a lot more time focusing on, a lot of what we're having to do with memory is going to be retrospective because you're not necessarily analyzing it in real time. But that's, as we were hearing about in the keynote, we learn from what our attackers are doing to build better defenses.
What telemetry you can't give up?
It's like asking who's your favorite child.
I know, that's why we're talking about it. It's supposed to make you sweat.
So endpoint for sure, but I think you can't really discount network telemetry either. Cisco makes a combination of products. Some if you didn't know, they make networking gear. So things like snort logs, and then also the Cisco Secure Suite that we make. The telemetry that comes out of that. I think they kind of tie together because you can see, okay, well, these logs are all going to correlate by a timestamp or what have you. So. If I had to pick one, I get more mileage out of endpoint.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I want to add to that, though, too. Like, any and all hunting grounds are great, providing you have enough historical context. Like, that's if I could wave my magic wand, like that would be the piece that's missing. Is getting more and more data over a longer period of time. I think would unlock a lot of opportunity.
Awesome. I think for me, I have a deep background in email security for several years, and having email is really, really fun to talk about because the social engineering aspects combined with a malware attachment or a link to click, you can kind of say, wow, they're saying that they've kidnapped your dog and they're holding it hostage and the only way to get it back is to click this link and put in your creds. And that kind of is a really cool telemetry that's far up in the stack that allows you to do a lot of prevention that I really like.
I will never forget, you gave a talk one time showing a lure that you thought would have caught a lot of people, and it was about a imminent incoming divorce from somebody's attorney.
Oh, yes. Your divorce papers have been prepared. And there was a link that it looked like it was from an attorney, and you could click to view the divorce papers. And this is the thing. I loved that one. And this is the thing I'll tell you about social engineering. Never count it out. Because raise your hand in here if you ever have fallen for social engineering.
Everyone should raise their hand.
Raise your hand if you know someone who would fall for social engineering. Not me, I would never. Okay, but you know somebody, so you gotta protect them.
Mortgage paperwork. It's always mortgage paperwork.
Mortgage paperwork, yes.
Yep.
Look, people love to dig into other people's business, divorces, mortgage paperwork, taxes, bank accounts. That's the kind of stuff that gets people to click a lot of times. So I wanna go back to crime versus APT. I have become even more of a crimeware and financial motivated actor tracker junkie since coming to Microsoft because it's something that I feel like we can talk about a lot more. So if you had to choose only one to work on for the next 2 years, the landscape over the next 2 years, Paul, I'll start with you. If you could only do crime or APT for the next 2 years, which would you pick?
I don't think either one would exhaust 2 years worth of work, but I think there would probably be more crimeware to look at because it casts a wider net. APT tends to be more focused on particular high-value targets, so I'd probably say crimeware.
Okay, I have converted one person to crime. Melissa, you're next.
No conversion needed. For me, it would be crimeware, and I say that because I come from a background of working in very small shops for very small companies, and those companies are more likely to be targeted and even shut down because of the impacts of crimeware.
Waymon, you're already on crime. Would you
I
stick
know,
with it?
yeah.
Would you stick with it?
I would, yeah. I love the chaos that is crime, and I thrive in chaos.
Me
so-
too. Okay, so since we are all fantastic crime fans, I'm gonna ask you the APT question, but you can only pick one country. Paul, what country would you pick?
It's got to be Iran.
Iran,
Russia.
Russia,
China.
China. I picked DPRK because it's got that crypto hotness.
We got all of them.
Yeah.
We got it all. We got it. So between the four of us, they've got it all. So as I learned in the MDDR, actually.
That wasn't planned, by the way.
That wasn't planned. As I learned in the MDDR, there is a single group out of DPRK that has already stolen over $1 billion worth of cryptocurrency. So if you work DPRK, you have one of the most fascinating actor groups that you could have, I think, because they cross this crimeware blood barrier between APT and crime. It's really interesting. So I want to move on and ask the audience, has anyone heard about high-profile breaches at casinos lately? Has anyone had their leadership ask them about high-profile breaches at casinos lately? Has anyone been asked to put together briefings on casinos? Right, so casino and gaming over the past month or two has become just the landscape because it has a couple of elements that are really attractive to the general public. One, I mean, how many Ocean's 11 movies are there? It's the same thing, but it's on the cyber landscape. I saw stock photos of slot machines spraying money out of them in some of these news stories. That didn't happen, but it was the stock photo that was used in the media. And so it's really captured a lot of attention. But those of us on stage and those of you in the room are actually working incidents and protection for these casino and gaming targets. And so I want to ask the panel, and I'm going to start with Melissa because Melissa actually has a background working at casino and gaming facilities in tech and security. What is that landscape like? What are the differences between a casino and gaming resort and a hospital?
Yeah, so I did get my start a couple of years ago. One of my earliest jobs in tech was working on a casino floor on grave shift, which is the most interesting time to be in a casino. The threat landscape is different even when you look at a casino resort versus just a regular hotel property. You've got a 24/7 op that is around entertainment, lights, a little bit of chaos. Like casino environments are designed to kind of disorient you. So
and everyone's drunk.
Well, yeah, exactly. You know, like everyone's either they are working on grave shift and they're exhausted, so the employees might be a little more easy to social engineer. You know, there's great physical security in casinos. Some of the best physical security experts I've ever met in my life came out of the casino security industry. But the human element in a casino is unpredictable, and I think that makes it attractive. I think also, you know, it's no secret casinos hold a lot of cash. We were talking about this before the panel, that casinos are almost like a bank, but without quite as much regulation. They're usually regulated at the state level, but not necessarily quite the same way at the federal level.
Can I stop you to highlight that for a moment? Go back to what you just said.
It's like a bank, but without the same kind of regulation.
It's like a bank, but without the same kind of regulation, which sounds crazy to me.
Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, there is regulation in the casino industry, but it's you know, you've got people coming in, putting large swaths of money down and literally gambling it away in high-risk situations. So your opportunity for them to miss their money if it goes missing or notice an anomaly. And then there's an additional attractive element to casino as an attack surface in that there's a lot of PII, like people have their bank account info, their tax information, because the casinos have to report to the IRS. You know, like it's a treasure trove of financial PII data, high chaos situation, easy social engineering surface. Like it doesn't surprise me that casinos are under an attack. I think we've seen more in the media about it because there was a cluster of them all at once. But I don't think that there's, you know, like you said, Ocean's 11, they're a popular attack surface in general.
Waymon, let me ask you this. You actually are going to be presenting about Octotempest later today at 11:45 in this very room. Be here. Give me some idea of what the threat actors are doing specifically at these gaming casino targets that might be unique.
Yeah, I think, right, Melissa touched on a point about social engineering. We've seen Octotempest and a lot of other groups target entertainment and gaming industry and really, really nail down the social engineering aspect there. Things that are a little bit different, right, is that, you have a community like, for example, Octotempest, that's very focused around identifying people, doing a lot of open source type investigations, right? They love to dox people. They love to find out everything they can. One thing that's very unique that we've seen is that, they'll identify a lot about employees that work at these industries. They'll learn everything about their personal lives, and they'll go and contact like the customer support desk or help desk, one that's running 24/7 again, right? And they'll impersonate this employee and they'll be like, hey, this is, I work at this company, I have all this information, here's all my personal information, but, I need you to reset my password. And when pressed for like employee information, like, do you have your employee ID number or things like that, they'll be like, oh, well, I don't really have it. They'll make up an excuse, they'll entice that employee to just get them to reset the password, and it happens a lot. So
let me give you a real world example from back when I was in that environment. Is where our IT ops office was sort of across the property from where the casino gaming floor was. It'd be 3, 4 in the morning, and I'd get a call from the pit floor, which is where like all the gaming tables are if you've been in casinos. Hey, I need you, like I'm locked out. I can't register this player's rewards information. Like I need you to unlock my password. And I'm like, well, you're gonna have to come up here. I need to see your employee ID. Like we had a policy of we need to see your physical photo printed issued ID badge for me to reset your password. And I was the only person on duty, so I can't exactly leave the ops center at that time. And they said, well, if you don't understand, this is a high roller. Like I have to get them in now, just reset it. I'll get my manager to override like the approval later. And I'm like, send your manager up here with your ID. Like, and these are situations that actually do happen, even when it's not necessarily someone being malicious, but because it's a high pressure, high profit environment. And so for a threat actor to capitalize on that same pattern of behavior, totally realistic.
I would love it sometime in my life if someone would say, I can't, I'm here with a high roller, and refer to me. That would be really cool. Waymon, I just want to ask one more question in terms of kind of the dwell time on these actors that are doing casino and gaming. It sounds like they go from initial access to actual encryption super fast.
yes, they do. So just to Melissa's point too, right? We've also seen groups look up the IT admins at these companies and do the exact same thing. They'll call them up, be like, hey, I'm dealing with this, high profile or this VIP. I need you to reset my password now to get this done. And once they gain that initial access, this is a group, for example, in Octotempest, they do SIM swapping activity. They know who to target. They move quickly. So, we've seen, from initial access all the way to global admin or compromise to ransomware deployment within 24 hours, sometimes even less than that. They move incredibly faster because they know what's at stake, and they know the faster they can do disruptions and operations, the quicker they would probably pay.
And it sounds like the actor themselves are actually very young and energetic. And how do you think that plays into it?
I think it plays a lot into it, right? This is a group of individuals who are kind of based in Western countries, or what we call Western countries. They understand, like, they have lots of trial and error. They call and try to social engineer people all the time. So they know what works, they know what doesn't. They understand how the industry works, and they're just very, very persistent. So.
All right, well, I'm excited to see you and Riley Childs at 11:45 to go deep on Octotempest. So something we've mentioned a couple of times since we've been talking here is social engineering. I love email and I love social engineering, particularly because it does bring in that human element. And I also feel like it's something that's so universal and so hard to protect from. So in terms of what you're seeing out in the wild, I'll kind of start. We're seeing a ton of email lures that ask people to do things. And I think the number one element for social engineering that you have to have is putting someone in an emotional state where they make decisions they wouldn't normally make. That's what results in successful social engineering. If you don't have an emotional element, it's rarely going to be successful. So urgency is one that they're using when they're calling. Things like fear, sadness, excitement, joy, nervousness, all of the variety of human emotions. You have to be able to understand if they're triggering one of those to get someone to take an action that they wouldn't normally take because they're in that different emotional state than they would normally be. So, Paul, I'll start with you. What kinds of social engineering attacks, or what kind of attack chains, I guess, are leveraging social engineering in combination with other things?
I think you hit it right on the head. Urgency is one that I've seen a lot, creating fake emergency situations, and especially for targeting elderly folks, because I guess that's where the money is, and it tends to be effective. So, I get messages from my own mom saying, hey, this person says I owe them a bunch of money, and what do I do about this? Or, hey, this person said they were you, and they're in a car wreck, and they need me to call this number immediately. And so I said, my advice is always, don't call me, I'll call you. And that tends to be just, easy enough to remember and, effective enough so that she can think, okay, don't call me, I'll call you. That's all I need to know.
How many of you have had a family member contact you because of one of these social engineering attacks, either text or email? You're all the go-to for your family. Okay, constant tech support, right? Do these same people actually have any real understanding of what your job is? No. No. My son's a computer nerd. Let me call him. Yeah. Okay. Melissa, what about you in terms of social engineering that you've seen in the landscape lately?
I think that it's not just urgency, but contextually relevant urgency. There is a lot of research that goes into crafting effective lures. And so if you're reading the media, if you're watching people's LinkedIn, if you're seeing things that are happening in that industry or in that business, and you can craft a lure that creates a sense of urgency that is just believable enough to have an ounce of truth to it, you only need to get them to believe for half a second that, if I don't respond to this email, I am going to lose access to the new building my company's opening across town. Because there was a press release saying we're opening this building. I already know that to be true. This is totally realistic. And I've seen, there was something I saw recently where it was like, hey, notice this is our new external HR system. IT's working on getting the external tag removed. Oh. In the meantime, go ahead and create your account here. And it's like, come on, really?
You know what? I also saw a talk Friday from Dave Kennedy where he was talking about the same thing. He said, Dave Kennedy works at Trusted Sec, does spread teaming. So he said one thing that he finds works every time he's tried it is contacting an employee and telling him, tomorrow you're going to get a two-factor auth request from the corporate office, and I need you to accept this because we're doing some maintenance thing. And so then he sets up his hack the next day and pops out of a VPN somewhere near the corporate office, and every single time accept.
And it's almost like, if you can explain away, like we've trained people all of these years of what to look for in a phishing lure, but if you craft your lure with an explanation of why those warning signs don't matter, you've basically bypassed that defense.
Waymon, anything from the social engineering aspect outside of Octotempest that's interesting?
Yeah, I think there's like shifts to like other different mediums where the conversations are more casual, right? Like reaching out to people through SMS or WhatsApp or like those types of mediums and engaging in those conversations, but also like outside of that, we look at like recruitment for insider threats too, where sometimes we'll see people say like, hey, like I know all about you, I know what you do, like how do you want to do, like how do you want to make extra money? You want to make extra money here? Just click on this link or do this, and then have plausible deniability. So they also cater to that fact, right, where they want to recruit you to do their bidding. And they do it in ways outside of email. They want to make things less official to keep it casual. And you're less likely to like respond or look at things officially, right, if you're just like pulling up your phone sometimes and seeing it that way.
So I want to talk really quickly about the artwork. Has everyone seen this before, St. Paul and Pipe? You're familiar with this? This is a Renee Margaret, which deals with the nature of reality and what is real. So is this a pipe? Yes. But it's not, because it's a picture of a pipe. And it's about the illusion of, is this real or not? So an email from your CEO, what is in front of you is an email from your CEO, but it is not what it seems, because it's not really an email from your CEO. So it creates this paradox of what you're looking at is what you're looking at, but it's also not really what you're looking at. And I feel like art has actually done a really good job of exploring the differences between what is art and what is real. And in fact, I can carry that further into things like online trolling, which is this, are they being serious by saying this, or are they just saying this to upset people? Ultimately, it doesn't matter because they're still saying it. And so that's kind of the paradigm that I think all of us kind of have to think about. And I know in security, we're always looking at something and going, is this real? I'd probably say that 10 times a day. Is this real? Is this for real? And a lot of times it is, and a lot of times it's not. And you have to kind of define where that line is for yourself and for how you're securing the organizations that you're responsible for securing. So we'll go to kind of some final discussions here. I think we want to end kind of on something positive and talk a little bit about advice. So there's two kinds of advice that I'd like to hear. First is kind of how we can better secure our environments, the world, where we work. What's some things that you feel like we need to do better for security? But I also want to hear advice from you on what you think people should be doing in their careers. So I'll start with Paul, because I've been starting with Waymon a lot. Paul, tell me, from a technical perspective, what's something that we really need to get messaged out to the security world that needs to be focused on?
So one thing that got my gears turning when I was watching John Lambert's presentation next door was the sort of commonalities that we see that he laid out between, amongst all these different types of attacks. And you see so many patterns, and being able to recognize these patterns, and better yet, using technology to recognize these patterns, I think is really going to level up the defense game going forward. Recognizing when the adversary has gained a foothold, has spread access, and has either stolen or destroyed data. I mean, those are just the three, main things that we see in attack campaigns. And those are easy for us to recognize, but we can also, with a large enough data set, we can start training, ML models on that sort of thing. And we'll probably see more of that tomorrow.
I think that that's also really important, because the things that you just mentioned are very much aligned with the CIA triad. Everyone knows CIA triad, right? It's so foundational. I think it's funny that, like, how old is that concept? Literally 120 years old or something. It's really old. But I still feel like it's so relevant and matters so much. From a career perspective, what can you tell the people in this room?
I think combining disciplines, right? I don't think it's enough anymore to just say I specialize in, network defense or endpoint defense or any of these things. I think combining the sort of emerging technologies that we see with what we've all already learned up until this point. So, and to get started early, there's a program from the Air Force that my son is doing. He's 12 years old. 13 years old, he'd kill me.
So it's child abuse then.
But he's very interested in it, and I think getting starting people early and recognizing these things, it'll help a lot.
So to the first question of what can we do to improve security, I think, has everybody in here seen, Matt Swan years ago did this incident response hierarchy of needs? Has anybody in here seen that?
Pyramid.
So or pyramid of needs, yeah. So it's a pyramid. And so backstory, I've got my bachelor's degree was in psychology before I ever got into tech. So this speaks to my heart with Maslow's hierarchy of needs for human self-actualization. But this is looking at the incident response hierarchy of needs. And it starts with telemetry and asset inventory and visibility at the very bottom foundations of the pyramid. And I think that's probably the one step that I talk to a lot of organizations who say, all right, we want to go threat hunting. And I'm like, that's great. 60% of your endpoints are unaccounted for.
Asset management.
That's why they want to go threat hunting. They don't want to deal with that stress.
I know, right? And I'm like, you're paying those threat hunters a lot of money, and they are being 40% as effective as they could be. So if I could foot stomp underscore anything, it's getting those foundational elements of visibility, telemetry, and detection capabilities solid and healthy. Should be step one. And we say that, and it's easy to say, but I talk to people every day where they've got 80% or 60% coverage. As for what you can do in your career, it's a twofold piece of advice. Number one is learn how to communicate, because you may have the most rock solid security plan for your organization, but if you can't go convince an executive to fund it, it's dead in the water. So learn to communicate. And as a piggyback off of that, build relationships. The number one thing that has made me successful professionally is my willingness to go to someone who works in a completely different department and say, so what is it you do here? Like, tell me your job. I'm legitimately curious, because A, people love to tell you what they do. They love to talk about themselves and their work. You start to learn more about how your business actually makes money and what matters to your business, which helps you advocate for things to secure that, therefore get funding. See, this all comes full circle. But it also, I've actually had that almost become like a canary system for people to be like, oh, well, I actually do the contracts. And when I'm finished typing up the contract, I put it in this insecure FTP upload to go to this lawyer's office across town. And I'm like, you do what? So if you learn to talk to people and actually get curious about what other organizations in your company do, you will learn about how technology flows, and security is uniquely positioned to have this like huge view of how everything fits together.
Waymon?
I mean, the last bit for me to answer your first question, I think everyone's favorite advice would be to have better documentation. I feel like, in the sense that, like, I think what we see in the industry is that we have all of these reporting, all of these things that come out, but one thing that we really need to track well is how we tag indicators. And my colleague, Steve Miller, will have a whole lecture on this, but essentially the way that we track and how we pivot, especially as you've seen in the keynote, how we can move across these indicators, how we move about that, collaborating with our analysts to show that we have these anchor pieces, we have the ways to recreate the path that other companies, other analysts take, I think is really important. And the last bit about what to do in advancing your career, I think there's multiple ways. I think one is to touch on everybody else's point, right? Identifying different avenues of collaboration is very important. Finding, companies or analysts working at places where you don't have visibility within your own environment, but they do, and working together to, on the same threats. And the last bit too is also to start early, right? Again, with KC7, like we try to give real-world data to people and have them look at that. Get your reps in on investigating threat actors, get your reps in and identifying TDPs and IOCs within a wide array of different environments, and I think you'll be successful there.
I love it. So I'm going to give everyone one piece of career advice, and that's that I know every single one of you is a stressed out weirdo, and you need to protect your mental health and you need to protect your peace, because if you really think about it, I would bet that for most of you, what makes you good at your job is that you have an overbuilt sense of anxiety.
Weaponized anxiety.
You have weaponized clinical anxiety. And you've
all of
learned,
you feel seen right now.
Yeah, it's like I see your faces. You've learned that if you have anxiety and you look at code or you look at a PCAP or you look at a network diagram, that you find the things that are bad. And you say, oh, that's bad, I don't like that. Oh, that stresses me out. That's very bad. Oh God, I don't like any of this. Here's a problem. If you apply that same mindset to your personal life, you will die alone miserable. Keep it at work and keep yourself constantly checking if you're using your professional skills to look for bad things in your personal life, because that's something that you're training yourself to do that you can unwind. You're knowledge workers, so you need time to really think and really self-reflect on that, because this is a great career to be in. It's a great industry to be in, but you don't want it to like overtake your peace. So thank you to my panel. Let's give them a round of applause.